Hey YouTube, it's Dave from Dave vs. Axie. In today's video, we're going to cover an interview that I did with Jiho talking about the past, present, and future of Axie as we move into 2022. I hope you enjoy. Thank you guys all for tuning in. So obviously today we have Jeff Zerline, also known as the Jiho, live with us doing an interview discussing everything Axie Infinity. So thank you so much, Jeff, for joining us. Appreciate you coming over today and hanging out with us.
Now, awesome to be here, man. Super stoked. It's been a long time coming for us to sit down and chat a little bit. We hung out in New York a bit. That was amazing experience. Thanks for helping out with that community meetup at the bar. We had Axie Chat Live. That was amazing. So yeah, big fan of your content and excited to be here.
Appreciate it. So, real quick, I'm going to give a brief preface as to kind of the point of the interview and what we're going to talk about, but just keynotes that I want to call out. So, Jeff is the head of growth at Axie Infinity. He is not in charge of coding, developing, or kind of creating the game, but his job is really to share perspectives from the community back to the dev team and dev team back to the community and ultimately grow Lunacia as a whole. So just a keynote, Jeff cannot pump SLP for you, and he does not just really make the game. His job is not to do that. Second thing for myself, I have about half of my crypto or NFT investments are all tied in Axie Infinity investments. So I am very optimistic on the game's future, and just kind of today is to gain more perspective, go in depth into kind of Jeff's experiences throughout the last year, where we are currently, and kind of how he sees the future transpire within Axie Infinity. So we're going to jump right in. Um, I joined in February, and obviously a massive year for Sky Mavis and Axie Infinity. If you can, what were your team's goals rolling into 2021 as we're now about to roll into 2022?
Yeah, sure. So at the beginning of every year, the different teams, different team leads, we lay out a plan with goals, with initiatives, with systems that we're looking to roll out during that year. For my team, the growth team, it's kind of like growth, community, economy. It's kind of all very interconnected. So I'm looking at my sheet, and yeah, I was pretty conservative. So I was so we were going from we had 28,000 Axie holders at the beginning of the year, and we were shooting for 1,500% growth to 375,000. We did quite a bit more than that. We're now at almost 3 million holders. It's more than 15,000
Wow.
percent growth. So yeah, just to take a step back, it's been an amazing year. We saw our community reach new heights. Right, everyone in crypto is now aware of Axie. At the beginning of the year, people, I would go to crypto conferences and people would had no idea what Axie is. So it's been amazing. Obviously, huge exponential growth also comes with a variety of challenges. So yeah, 15% holder growth. I wanted to end the year with around 20,000 ETH in the community treasury as well. We're at 50,000 with a lot of Axis as well in there. So that was also another goal that was hit. Uh, yeah, I think I wanted 150,000 daily active users. We're now at 2.5 million daily active users, so that's also another goal that was hit. I'm not going to talk too much about the other teams. Like that's kind of what was in charge of architecting and projecting and kind of setting as goals. But I think this year was really a year of infrastructure upgrades. Right, this was the year of Ronin, where we had been training in the hyperbolic chamber of Ethereum for about 3 years, right? Where we saw that every time that we started to hit a growth spurt, gas prices would rise, right? And it would just choke out the entire ecosystem. So we needed to take our destiny into our own hands. That's why we call Ronin Ronin. Ronin is a masterless samurai. So we launched Ronin this year. That was definitely like the big focus to make it much easier to interact with Axie by reducing transaction fees, making things faster, and generally kind of making sure that all of our marketplace, our wallet, claiming SLP was super smooth, right? So we rolled out Ronin in April. It was a huge growth catalyst. That's kind of right when things started to go hockey stick. and yeah, it was amazing. Obviously, we also just recently had the launch of Katana, which went very smoothly, and it's one of the largest dexes in the world right now. So yeah, I think like in terms of releases, right? Like a lot of the focus was definitely around the infrastructure, which I think can also be a little bit frustrating for people who are like, right, they want new content. I want new content, right? I'm from the community. If people don't know, like I'm kind of just a random guy that showed up into the Discord when there was like 10 people in and just started helping out.
I feel like,
So you know,
yeah, on that real quick, I feel like you're the guy that just forced himself into the party. He's like, hey, I'm gonna help. I want to be here, so like, just let me help you and maybe pay me if I do a good job.
that's the spirit of the community, right? Like that's really the spirit of the project is harnessing that volunteer kind of spirit from the community. Obviously, the awesome thing is that we can also align incentives through shared ownership of common assets. But yeah, that spirit is definitely part of our DNA. So
Sure. So
yeah,
massive.
mhm.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Yeah, so yeah, I think like with that theme, right? Like obviously it unlocked massive growth, and but yeah, like I think in terms of right, like people who are itching for new gameplay content, I also can see how right, like they'd be itching for more and kind of yeah, kind of almost begging for more content, and I understand that, I empathize with that, and yeah, for sure.
Definitely. And so, as you reflect on that, how do you view kind of the boom of players from an investor standpoint, from a scholar standpoint, and how we kind of created free to play without really creating free to play?
Yeah.
Um, do you think that was a net? I personally, I will share my sentiment first. I think it is a net positive, but it obviously comes with a lot of challenges because now there's millions and millions of dollars invested from DAOs or hedge funds coming into the game that obviously they're expecting an ROI. You have scholars or certain people potentially in third world countries or impoverished areas that are relying on a utility token for their income. How do you as kind of the growth manager take that all in, and what's your perspective around that?
Sure. First, yes, it's definitely, was a net positive that we had exponential growth this year, no question about it. And, that was also able to secure the future of Axie, right? Like a lot of people, they're not aware that, right? Sky Mavis also raised a Series B round. We actually raised a Series A and a Series B this year in US dollars. So like cold hard cash, like not really correlated to crypto, to fund the development of Axie, of our infrastructure for years to come, right? I think like we're thinking in terms of decades, right? And I think this is also something that yeah, we're looking to educate the community around. But yeah, exponential growth, especially around an economy like this, it creates a lot of right, struggles, issues, complications. It's messy. This is frontier tech, right? If you're not dealing with huge problems, huge interesting problems, and right, getting pushback from the mainstream media, things like this, right? If you're not doing that, then you're not at the frontier. That's something that Chris Dixon, I think, just recently tweeted out. So definitely, right, like managing an economy of 20,000 people and now almost 3 million people, there's a lot more, right? There are now like there's now way more SLP being created per day, right? That also means that we have to scale demand for SLP, whether that be through demand to breed Axies, or potentially other stuff in the future, like in Axie Sync, and that's stuff that we take really seriously. So yeah, it's also been an amazing learning experience. We've gotten way more systematic in the way that we monitor the economy. Right, there's two aspects of the economy, right? There's the monitoring, so making sure that we're ingesting the right data to make scientific decisions that are best for the community, and then also, right, like using that data to enact changes, whether that be to the to the breeding fee or even like SLP emission rates through the game as well.
Okay, and so with that raise, obviously that means more people. We saw in the dev update there was a lot of hires recently. For
Mm.
me, been back in Feb. You had a land alpha last December, and we'll get into land a little bit, but just more from the dev and development team. I think something that not everyone really knows is really how I've understood it, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's two teams. There's a Sky Mavis team that is like Sky Mavis, and there's an Axie Infinity team under Sky Mavis. And so kind of the DAO AXS is all to manage Axie Infinity, but Sky Mavis will always kind of be, in my eyes, their own thing. Like they will always be
Mm.
kind of a separate entity company. So how was that? And again, it's not necessarily your core job, but has there been pivots or changes that were made with among kind of dev team? Do you think we should have been more proactive sooner? Because with the growth spurt in June, with hiring more, bringing on more, like any kind of consensus thoughts around that?
Sure. Obviously, so yeah, our team size is right almost tripled in just the last 3 or 4 months, and the fact that we've become a household name in crypto has also led this. Right, we're led to this. We're getting the best talent. Right, so it's like yes, it would have been nice to hire way ahead of this growth spurt, but also it's like the right people and the people, right, like the bucket or the net that we're casting for amazing candidates, right? Some of them from traditional gaming companies that are super interested in crypto. The bucket or the net just got massively expanded because of the growth spurt. So yeah, like I think our long term output definitely was upgraded, and it was obviously the more people that you have, the more output you in the long run. But there's also when you're onboarding a lot of people, right? It takes time to train them up to make them understand, everything that we're building and figuring out like what exactly they're doing and accomplishing. From the day to day, we also had realized that there are certain teams that we needed that we didn't need in the past, right? Like the support team, right? So we now have, right, I think around 10 people on the support team. That is actually part of the Axie DAO. They're being managed by programmatic. You guys probably are aware of the Hera, the myth. Programmatically Pull is doing amazing like work in the trenches. So right, it comes with right like massive growth. It definitely expedites hiring needs. But then at the same time, like hiring a bunch of people, right? It's not just like they don't just step into their role and start producing right away. It takes a bit of time for them to get adjusted and acclimated and kind of become part of the well-oiled machine.
Awesome. And so and actually it's funny too, because if you talk about how small, just to put in frame of reference to that, I think it was pre-Ronin or right around when Ronin launched, so pre-massive expansion. Jiho posted like in general or somewhere, "Hey, I'm looking for some mods for Discord," and I actually DM'd Jiho at the time, being like, "Hey, I don't know if it's a paid job or whatever. Like, I don't know what your guys' financial situation's like, but yeah, I'd be interested in."
Mm.
He was looking for someone full time. I wasn't able to fulfill the job, but it was funny. Like, I'm sure that's just even how you had to hire has now massively evolved from just in March.
Yeah, I mean, we have an entire team now dedicated to hiring and all the
Yeah.
processes related to that. Whereas, like in the past, it was like, hey, like anyone want to come work for
Right.
Sky Mavis? Like post that at Discord and Twitter and see what happens. I mean, that's actually how we found Programmatically Pull, right? I mean, I found him in the support channel, just helping people, like doing basically the job that I wanted him to do. I just
Oh,
wanted him
that's
to be
awesome.
able to dedicate right his life to it. So
Right.
yeah, it's been amazing to welcome so many new faces. We also want to do a better job introducing these new faces to the community so that they get really excited and feel more connected, especially with our new teammates. So that's something that I think should be a priority as well for 2022. That's also obviously right, like communication around hiring people is also it's something that right, like, we're super lean, right? Like we're a startup. We have to make sure that we're spending our time as efficiently as possible, and sometimes yeah, that causes there are things that would be really nice to do that have to be deprioritized, and kind of like put in an icebox and say, hey, like let's do that next year.
Right. No, that makes sense. So last thing I want to talk about in the past is we had a lot of changes this year from the way breeding worked to obviously moving from Ethereum to Ronin. SLP minting rates and kind of breeding costs have been adjusted. SLP, kind of how you earn it throughout Adventure and Arena, has been adjusted there at different times too. From your side or the team that you can understand, what triggers that? And then are all the desired results actually being achieved, and are they usually the obvious desired results, or is there something else in the back end that like to the future that we just have no idea about as to why it's being changed at that time?
Sure. So yeah, adjusting the economy is always a tricky thing, but I think that it's something that we've done quite well, and is one of the reasons that we're leading the space right now in terms of basically all metrics. But I will say that it's a messy process. It's not perfect, and it's something that we're learning and kind of learning with the community day by day, step by step. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about like I guess our goals when we're for managing the economy. So we're basically looking to manage inflation of in-game resources, whether that be Axis and SLP, to make sure that there is right some value. But we also but obviously right, like, you can't just manage it by reducing because right, people also are looking to earn by playing the game, so that also causes some complications, right? We look at breeding, right? So the number of Axies that are being bred per day, the number of Axies that are being bought from the market per day, the spread between a virgin Axie and the breeding fee, and right, like making sure that right there is some incentive and there's some cushion for breeders to breed. Does that mean that a virgin floor Axie should be higher than the breeding fee all the time? Not necessarily, and it could, and this could be hard for us to ensure that, but we're always aware of right, like what is the net spread for breeders. It's gonna fluctuate too with growth, with hype around crypto and NFTs, but it's something that we're aware of when we're making these adjustments. Right, so yeah, and then so what are the considerations around this, right? So I think we also went through our thinking a little bit. So, right, looking at like, okay, so floor axes basically, should reflect two things. Like one, most importantly, how fun is the game, right? What if Axie Infinity is a theme park, right? The part of the cost of that cost of admission is going to be like, okay, how fun is this theme park? And then obviously there's the economic aspect. Is like, what are the future projected earnings from owning an Axie or a team of Axies. So that's one thing that we look at, right? And then, yeah, like looking at the breeding profitability, like looking at the spread between the breeding fee and the virgin floor Axies, right? And then there's also, right, I think, which something that the community is super has a lot of opinions on, which is what is the portion of the breeding fee that's paid in SLP, and what is the portion of the breeding fee that's paid in Axis, right? So right now, SLP is the main token that's earned by playing the game. Over time, we will be looking to emit way more Axis tokens by playing the game as well. So I think this is also part of the long-term solution is, right, like everyone cares about SLP because that's the most widely owned asset within the ecosystem. But so one of the ways to reduce reliance on SLP is by also, turning up the knob on Axis emissions. So that's another thing that we have in our kind of policy toolkit, but it's something also that we want to be cautious with because, right, maybe that's something that we save for V2 or basically in the future, right? Because we are still in alpha, right? Pokemon is a game that took 9 years to build. We're in, year 4.
I actually didn't know that. That's a good stat. And then it's been repeated now for 20 years or 30 years, whatever it's been. But yeah.
Uh,
Um,
yeah. So then, yeah. So those are some of the considerations. There's others, right? So basically, if the access portion of the breeding fee gets too high, then right, it's kind of like the owners of the game. Even though, right, like anyone can be an owner of this game, it's still the owners of the games are perhaps being a little bit too extractive relative to right, like the farmers and things like that. So it's something that needs to be carefully balanced. It's something that we can look to balance and make sure is reasonable. It's not necessarily right, like we can't control this, the ebbs and flows of the crypto market as well. So that's also something that I hope the community understands, and something that we also have to. We're not like, we can't be like almighty powers within the system. We're still going to be susceptible to the global economy, the crypto economy, and things like that.
100%. Also, good note there too. Like SLP is not a centralized liquidity pool that you can just dial back or burn as you choose. It's in so many other dexes and places you can buy and trade that it is important to note. All right, let's transition to current state. So one thing I especially wanted to hit on was Katana. Katana was pegged by you in a couple of tweets as a bigger impact to the overall game or economy, I guess, of Axie and Sky Mavis than even Ronin's launch was. From a spectator's perspective, I haven't seen that necessarily. Obviously, Katana's huge. I'm farming Ron. Ron's got a lot of hype to it.
Mm.
But from your perspective, do you still think that's going to be the case? And is the main factor going to be the true release of Ron and kind of, a 5-year roadmap ahead? You're going to be like, Katana was the moment where everything changed.
Yeah, I think right now there is right. We're in an interesting situation with Katana because you can't actually see what the APY for the pools is, and so they're kind of like they're good. They're pros and cons to this. Pros is like the people who really believe in the future of Ron are the people that are of the Ronin network are the ones that are mostly farming Ron. But then also, right, because there's that uncertainty around what the actual APY is, then this might reduce demand from SLP and even Axis for people who might not who might just be interested in experimenting. If they see, oh, like this APY is super high, I'm gonna go into this pool, right? So it's a balancing act. I think different people have different aspects on perspectives on it, right? I think like some of the super hardcore Axie community members are like, don't reveal the APY, like, right, just let me get as much run as possible. Let's keep it at whatever $1.2 billion in liquidity. Then, right, it's also like more liquidity is definitely like probably better for the in-game economy as well. So it's a little bit of a tricky thing. I am really excited to allow to have Ron claimable by the community and reveal that APY. I also say that everything around, right, like Katana is kind of flexible. Like will we at the end of 90 days, like we may have to assess, like are we going to continue liquidity rewards and things like that. So yeah, that might be a little bit of a leak in terms of at least how I'm thinking about it. This is not necessarily like official team canon, but I was one of the person. I was very, I guess, like key in designing that pool setup. So that's kind of how I'm thinking about it. So yeah, I think Katana is huge. I think that all play and earn game economies will need easy access to some sort of a decentralized exchange. The future, I think, like, right, like when we think about Ronin, right? Ronin is going to be for the next generation of Axie games, but also the next generation of premier NFT games, right? So that might be even outside of the Axie universe, right? These games are going to need a decentralized exchange. So yeah, it's like definitely like Katana is like, it's a 1 month old piece of the ecosystem right now, and I'm super excited about how it's gone. Obviously, right, with the crypto volatility and stuff like that, it's maybe like muted some of the excitement around it, and I totally understand that as well.
Awesome. And one question I had around it, do you see yourself turning Katana into a full-fledged DEX, or do you think it will just be a token DEX for all things NFT games, be it Axie or other games within the Mavis Hub?
I think we're gonna stay lean with our approach to it. Like if we see benefits for our community for opening it up even more to things outside of NFT games, I think we'll run with that. We also want to make sure that we're spending our time on enabling the things that really add the most value.
Cool. And again, I hope the APY is good. My impermanent loss right now looks really bad, but I have a
Same.
lot of
I mean, I'm farming Ron too. So
yeah, I have a lot of SLP. So I guess once breeding kicks in, I can take it out of that, and I'll be breeding for days. So very excited for that too. And then another thing I want to hit on current state. So land alpha test delay. When I got in, I think at the beginning of the year, the hope was to have land by like end of Q2 or somewhere around there. Then Ronin happened and everything got blown up to like there was no real ship date for it. And for what got me in the game was the Flying Falcon land purchase initially. So we've seen the timeline change a few times. If you could shed any other light as to, I'm okay this delayed, and I want to stress that I was disappointed because I have land and I'm super excited to go play it someday. But I think just more clarity around like the why. Like, is it the evolution of land? Was it staffing? Hey, we didn't have enough people to actually execute. Was it a couple glitches you want to fix? And then from there, do you see there being more alpha testing coming in the near future, or are we like any other timetable into what it might look like in the future would be great.
Makes sense. I want to stress that we've made incredible progress on land. We did an internal test recently, and basically the feedback from the team was that, right, like this is it's going in the right direction. We're really proud of the progress, but it wasn't something that we felt was ready for the community to have like a really magical experience, right? Our bar is really, really, really high. Like we could have released it, and right, like I think people would have liked it. People would have, we had a community alpha, right, basically about a year ago as well, which actually the community really liked. We got awesome feedback. We were kind of like, we thought, we actually thought that, hey, we needed to rethink some of the aspects. So I think our bar in terms of releases can sometimes even be a lot higher than the communities, and I think that's part of it. I think that definitely having a lot of unexpected, I guess like exponential growth causes unexpected problems with, right, like sometimes like ties up personnel as well. And yeah, I think it's also, I think what we mentioned in the article is, and I think I talked about this in Discord the other day, right? Like we've had some awesome new people join the team, and we want to make sure that we can give them the space and the yeah, basically the capacity to help enact their vision on land, right? So it's like sometimes, right? If you imagine like you're doing a school project, and you're going down a certain path, you're pretty, you're pretty happy about the result, but then like the smartest person in your school, right, comes and has all these amazing ideas. You're more like, hey, like let's take a step back so that this person can really help us in this vision. So I think that was also a large part of it. The land team understands that the community was super excited for something around land, potentially around the holidays. We are, yeah, we're preparing something so that you guys can understand the current progress a little bit more tangibly as well. So
That's awesome. And obviously, you made a big boy purchase. You spent roughly 2 million USD on one of Flying Falcon's 9 Genesis plots. So, two questions on that. One, I'm sure you're super excited for lands, and I'm sure you were bummed too not to be able to
sure.
play around with it. But at the same time, too, what's your expectation around that purchase? Like, was it just to have kind of that stakehold of one of the rarest assets in the entire game? Are you actually expecting an ROI on it, or just kind of the future value you're anticipating to be more and maybe sell it one day to retire on it or something?
Yeah, sure. Like I think like everything in the Axie community and ecosystem, it's a combination of things, right? Like Coco was generously letting me hold one of his Genesis plots last year during the alpha, and I was able to hang out.
Okay.
I was able to play with it, and then this year, like I got a DM from him saying like, "Hey man, like send me the Genesis." Send me the Genesis back. I can't remember why. He had some good reason that he needed it back. So then I was like, oh, like I didn't have a Genesis, right? Like I was not a wealthy person, when we launched land for the first time, and so finally, right? Like it seemed I talked to Flying Falcon, and we kind of made it happen, right? So I think it's going to be amazing for me to have my own land to, right, just kind of show off in the community, to show off maybe my favorite Axies, my best land items. Yeah, also obviously, right, like there is some hope for, right, like harvesting awesome resources and tokens through that land. So it's a combination of things, right? And just having a lot of fun with it. Like I felt like it was something that I saw an opportunity, and I kind of wanted to run with it. And then I think like maybe that inspired someone, because we also saw, right, like
I know.
someone go and buy a Genesis for about I think 550 ETH, which I think was the largest sum ever paid for a single plot of digital land. So that was also awesome. So
Yeah, it's
yeah,
two and a half.
definitely,
Yeah,
definitely,
two and in one
yeah,
day at $2.5 million for the second one within about 6 hours of each other was an insane day for land sales.
sure, yeah. So definitely, right, as a player, as a community member, sad that I won't be playing with my land, this December. But also, right, like, I'm really excited about the potential, right? Like, I think some people too, they're very new to the community. So I also want to talk a little bit about like how I'm maybe viewing land, which is basically, right, like kind of, if you want to think in terms of mainstream analogs or comparisons, right, something kind of similar to a Clash of Clans meets Stardew Valley meets Animal Crossing, right? Where you're building up a town, harvesting resources, maybe fighting for control of territory. Long term, right? I think like maybe even enabled by the SDK, we also see land as a kind of a platform to build experiences on top of, maybe through portals and things like that.
So okay, so now we're gonna focus on future state, but I do want to stay on land for a minute.
Sure.
So land, in my opinion, is the real fire starter. Like V2, and we'll talk about that in a minute with maybe Axie release system. But land to me is like, once land is actually out in community and everyone can play on it, um, things could go parabolic, in my opinion. Like it could get nuts as to how many people want to get into land and just playing on it with their Axies. Um, how are you planning for that growth? Like obviously we saw a massive influx once Ronin hit, but how are you planning to meet where you could go from 3, 4, 5 million at the time land launches to I don't know what your number is considerably for like free to play, like 15, 20, 30, 40, especially if it's a mobile gameplay for land.
Hmm.
Any thoughts on that? And I think the SDK too. If you have any other knowledge you can share on that, like is that going to be only internally reviewed? Is it going to be publicly open to everybody, that anyone can build on it if they have land, or rent it to someone to build an SDK on? Like
Mhm.
any other knowledge on that would be awesome.
Sure. So I guess there's two aspects to this question, right? Like one
Yep.
is, okay, how are we thinking about like potential right growth catalysts from launching land, which should be an amazing experience that right like makes the game more accessible and beautiful and tantalizing to the rest of the world, right?
Yep.
So yeah, I think like we're also thinking about okay, if there's 17,000 plots of land, uh, right now. Also, it's like, how do we make this thing accessible? How do we make it so that, right, this is something that's enjoyed by the entire community rather than just landholders? So that's something that we're having like a lot of amazing internal discussions around right now. It's like basically, how do we make this something that all user archetypes or player archetypes are enjoying? So yeah, and then that also comes with right server scaling issues, right? That's also a personnel thing. It's just like okay, who are the people that have scaled massive game servers in the past, and do they want to come work at Sky Mavis, right? So that's also like just a personnel thing, right? Like I think
Hmm.
like what we learned through the summer. A lot of people might not remember, but in the summer, the game was growing so quickly that like you couldn't play for like 4 days or something.
I think it was like
Uh,
2 weeks. It was crazy. Like it was
oh yeah, it was
nuts.
like it was almost like weeks, right? So yeah,
Yeah.
but we like we want to make sure that stuff like that doesn't happen as much in the future. Can I promise that it's not going to happen? No, like there may be times where things get laggy, right? Like even Blizzard, I played my fair share of laggy Blizzard launches before. So yeah, but that's also a personnel thing, and it's something that we're attracting awesome talent, and yeah, luckily we've had like the server's been pretty stable recently, and oh, yeah, that's something that we take really seriously around LAN gameplay. The second aspect, right, is around the SDK and like building experiences on top of land and like how open that will be. So I'm not sure if you guys remember the early days of Steam, but right, like now anyone can launch a game on Steam, right? You just press a couple of buttons and it's super easy plug and play. That's something that actually took them around 5 years to get to that point. In the beginning, to get on Steam, you had to kind of know somebody. Like it was a lot more closed, I guess centralized. I think in the beginning, right, like just for quality control and to make sure that we're learning and making the best process, like right, we might be working with certain community developers and certain game studios to build on top of land, and then just open it up gradually over time to a place that's I think like much more open. So
And on that too, do you? This might be an alpha question. I don't know if you can answer it. Is anyone working on SDK games right now for like to be available at launch with land?
I don't think that it's going to be a launch feature.
Okay.
I would say that we're prioritizing crafting of and building of like uh, structures, harvesting resources, kind of like the bread and butter. Refining the art style, which we hope to show to you guys like really soon. So I think we're focusing on like the base verbs. I kind of tend to think of games in terms of like archetypes of players or professions and verbs, right? So like the harvester, the builder, maybe like the territorial land battler and grabber.
Cool.
I
So
think
it's almost
those are
like
the main
how
things.
I'd see it is like it's just WoW from initially, where you join into World of Warcraft, you just start doing all the harvesting, the battling, you do everything, and then kind of once you get to full level up, or for this will be probably time, then you'll have all these other games and things you can kind of expand into and keep it fresh always, and always have new adventures to enjoy.
Sure. I think like right, like there are so many elements of scaling, right? Scalability. This has been a major theme of the year, right? Like infrastructure scalability, community scalability, right? It's like we can't scale the Discord past 800,000, and that actually causes sometimes problems with the community, right? And then there's also scaling content, right? So long term, Sky Mavis isn't going to be able to build out all the content that's needed to keep a a community of hundreds of millions of people entertained all the time, right? We're gonna have to open up the game creation process.
Right, right. Okay, so I saw it. There's a bunch of snippets going around. I applaud you. I went actually checked your Discord chat recently, and you spend a lot of time in general, at least recently, and that
Mm.
is impressive because you're probably the most desired person to talk to in all of Lunasia. And so everyone saw the question where someone was like, "Hey, is there going to be secret parts that you can get?" Your response was yes, but then you came back and it
Mm.
was like, "Hey, I don't know."
Yeah.
I wanted to allow you. Do you want to clarify one way or the other if you have any insight to it?
it's like yes and no, if that makes sense. Like, because I confused myself because yeah, like some stuff that I've seen. So I guess like I'll say is I think like secret class parts would be cool. I think we definitely want to release more parts in the future, and I think like it would make sense for secret classes to be a thing. But I also yeah. So there was yeah like it also like like I'm gonna get in trouble, but like what else to say this has something to do. My confusion, my lack of clarity on this has something to do with starter axes. So um,
Lovely.
I'll give you a leak. I'll give you maybe a little bit of a leak that I might get in trouble for to explain why I gave kind of two different answers to that question.
Okay, I appreciate it. That's very exciting. And one other thought around that too, it's been questioned a lot. Is MEO3 a possibility? Is it a thing?
Yeah, it's not a priority right now. Like primary sales, right? Like this is a thing, right? Is like right selling Mio, selling more land, right? Like yes, the funds raised from doing selling this stuff would go back to the community through the community treasury. But right, like what is the purpose of getting more money right now, right? Like we need to grow, make the community we need to like focus on the community, we need to focus on development and making content, right? I think like anything that's not like new gameplay content, right? Like it needs to be like very carefully thought of. Yeah.
Great. Then on that, let's talk about some of the special things we do have, right? We have Japanese parts, Xmas, Origin, MEO, Mystics, and there's been a bunch of exciting things in between there. Um, is there things coming for those soon? Obviously, Mystics are still holding a very high floor. Some of the others have kind of dropped down, but there's always been kind of that tease that they're going to have more utility in
Mm.
some way, or it just might just be limited for aesthetics. Is that kind of more coming towards V2 land? Any thoughts on that?
Sure. So there are two reasons that you would own something like right a Mystic, an Origin, Neo, Holiday Axies, right? One is just right like scarcity. You know that they have like predefined scarcity, and they have cap supplies, and then there's right the flex, right? Just being able to say, hey, like I own a mystic, right? Like I'll probably respond to you like pretty quickly. Like if you're an Axie community member that like messages me or tries to reach out to me and you have a mystic, right? Right, there's certain utility too, right? Around like the social capital, right? There's utility within the community for being seen as a long-term thinker, someone, a connoisseur of nice collectible Axies. I'll also say that, yeah, like, definitely we're seeing a trend in NFTs for more utility around these scarce, beautiful assets. And I think so. If you guys read some of my early writings from 2018, I did write that, right? Like the triple threat, the thing that brings massive value to an NFT is a combination of utility, scarcity, and aesthetics, right? So I think right now we have with the scarcity aspect of these things is quite well defined. In some cases, the aesthetics is also like nice, but maybe like could be upgraded. And then around the utility, it's still uh, you know, not as well defined. And I think that's something that we're also like thinking hard about. There are different ways to do that. That could be in game. That could be even through the network, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So and it could be like something like, I don't know, like we're seeing like cool stuff experiments right now around like merch drops, right? Where if you own a certain NFT, like you can get access to exclusive merch. Like what kind of utility is that, right? Like some people would really like that. Some people that's not really their style. So but I think like in general, rewarding collectors is really important. Making collecting Axies, right, like kind of part of hype beast culture. I think that's one of the things that we need to spend more time on, and also some of the new personnel that we've added to the team, right? Like Jeff K from Discord, right? Like he was a product manager. He's now like working on the marketplace. I think like if people additions like that are also super key for that.
So I was gonna bring it up. Any updates on merch? It's all in chat. It's been asked a lot in chat. So and you brought it up, so I wasn't going to, but I'll let you share if you have any other thoughts on merch as of right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think like first, what I'll say is making the game more fun should be priority number one.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you ever think that we're slow on something, like right, this year was about making the game playable for right, and
3 million
not like
people.
$50 per transaction, right? So this was like this year was about making the ecosystem, right, like something that you could actually interact with, without like being like super wealthy or super into crypto, right? I think to a reasonable extent we've probably surpassing all expectations. We were able to accomplish that. But I think this year is going to definitely be a lot about making the game more fun, and focusing on content. But yeah, I think like merch is super important aspect of the community. And yeah, like we see our community members also like making awesome shirts for themselves. But I think there's also demand for official, I'll say quote unquote official Axie merch, and that's something that we've seen. I think people have probably seen on social media or even in person that we have new merch that has been designed, right? And we haven't sold it yet, but we've been giving it out. So yeah, I guess there's definitely stuff percolating on the merch front long term. So right now, actually. So one thing, so long term, right? Like I think that merch and toys and things like this can be an incredible aspect of the Axie community. Like what are the Star Wars made more off of toys, right, than the movies, right? Hello Kitty is actually one of the largest IPs of all time. What do? They sell like plushies, lunch pails, lipstick, right? Like kind of kawaii physical items. I think that Axie also, right, because of that kawaii aesthetic, and because it's universally appealing, I think the merch business can be so huge that it eventually becomes a major thing backstopping the in-game economy, if
Mhm.
that makes sense. So yeah, that's also been added to the white paper recently, right? Where we say like, right, we long term we need alternative sources of capital into the ecosystem to come in that aren't expecting return. When people buy a shirt, right, they're not necessarily looking to buy that shirt to flip it,
True.
right? They're just buying it out of pleasure, right?
That's actually a really good point I hadn't thought of, but great clarity there as to how the future of other revenue streams could look like for Sky Mavis and for Axie. I want to go into next. Let's go into kind of Axie grinder release system. It's been leaked a little bit by Ziora. You've talked about it before. That it's coming. It's obviously needed at some point. Is that a V2 look? Is that a land look? Is it a pre both of those venture? Because we've talked about as you go to V2, there's going to be new metas and there's going to be a ton of breeding going on, but
Mm.
there is inevitably going to be some bad Axies bred with the mutations
Mm.
added that we'll need to end of life them. So any thoughts on that, or like the token that might generate from it, and what you're going to use the remains of a released Axie for?
So we take Axie crafting really seriously. And I think one of the things that kind of has frustrated me, and maybe it's part of my failing communicating to the community, or our failing communicating to the community, is that Axie sync, Axie crafting, Axie, right? Axie burn, like where I'm going to use a burn in quotes because Axies will not be killed in this process. Right. So this is something that we've been thinking about since 2018. We came from the CryptoKitty community where, right, like exponential hyperinflation kind of killed that game. So we've always been thinking about, okay, how do we make sure that, right, like there's enough demand for Axies? How do we make sure that the Axie population doesn't get too out of control relative to the demand from the community? So this is something that we take really seriously, but it's also because we take it so seriously, it's not something that we're going to rush
Mm,
into implementing. And but yeah, I think like definitely with V2, there come major opportunities for alternative sources, right, to basically maybe right release Axie, get crafting material, use that crafting material to upgrade that Axie, or even buy things like stickers or emotes, right, that you can use to troll people while you're fighting. So yeah, I
okay.
think we need to do a better job of communicating that while it's being developed. Like it's a tricky thing because sometimes, right, like you want to leave some of the mystery around new mechanics, but also, right, like this is a real economy. There are citizens that are really relying on this economy in large ways. So I understand that people would really care about that. Like what I'll say is that I empathize with all the people who, right, are asking for alternate, right, like basically more, right, like more Axie sync is actually, right, like a derivative of, right, more SLP burn mechanics, right?
Sure.
Because each Axie is comprised of both SLP, Axis, time and effort and skill, right? These are actually the ingredients that you pour into an Axie, right? So saying that increasing demand for Axies, even also like kind of floor Axies, or what do people call them? Chop sueys, right? Like the ones that don't necessarily aren't useful in battle, it's definitely necessary to have uses for them long term. And so I want to reiterate that, and I also want to highlight that, right? Like updates to the white paper that we've made recently, that long term thinking article that we released last week was all catered towards that. But yeah, this has been a 4-year journey, right? Like we can't snap our fingers and make a feature materialize. It requires product engineering, like economy team to all collaborate and come to as close to perfect of a solution as possible. Right? If we just start knee jerk creating making decisions and creating new features, then things are going to break, and it's going to be much worse. I promise.
I forgot about the emote and the stickers. You mentioned that somewhere, maybe 6 months ago or something, but I completely forgot about it. So that's cool to recall that that's going to come at some point. Uh, Around that, and maybe you want to talk a little bit about V2 because that's been, I know that I think we even had like the alpha player test that was already checked off on the roadmap, so people are testing it, and we had some other,
Mm,
kind of leaks, whatever, maybe 3 months ago.
mm,
Alongside that, any comments or chatter about like what's next with V2 or Scholar rental system has been teased
mm.
before by the
Sure.
team, I think, in the summertime.
Yeah, so those are actually separate things. But yeah, like let's talk about V2 first. V2's it looks amazing. It's really fun. I think it's faster, more skill based, and it's going to be something that's way more accessible. Crucially, it's going to supercharge the ecosystem, because right now, right, I try to get people to play Axie all the time. That's actually kind of my job, right?
Yeah.
So I understand like the steps like pretty well, right? So right now it's like if you want to start playing Axie, you have to go through a weird kind of process where okay, like you can, even if you have the money to buy a team, you then have to basically you then have to like okay, like figure out what is the meta. How do you figure out the meta? Watch all these streamers and right, like walk you through the game. You basically have to start buying assets for a game that you've never played before and have only kind of either read guides or watched people stream. With free to play, you'll be able to fall in love with the game, fall in love with the art, understand the mechanics, do some progression before you either buy your own set of Axies or apply for a scholarship, right? So this is also gonna. We mentioned scholarship briefly too around this question. I
Mhm.
think that having free to play is actually also going to be super key for managers to be able to weed out like serious scholars, because then you're like, hey, like how far have you progressed in the free to play aspect of the game? So yeah, I think like V2 is really important. I think that a lot of the work that has to be done or is remaining around it is around card balancing, making sure that there's like a really thriving competitive scene around it, and then also the reward loops and making sure that it's going to impact our economy in an awesome way that makes the community extremely happy.
Yeah, no, I mean the free training is actually a great note that I hadn't thought about either when it comes to free to play and just being able to hey prove to me how good you are, or let's
Yeah,
even battle now like battle me with your free to plays. I'll
exactly.
I'll use my axes and it's almost like gym battling.
Yeah.
Um,
And also say that okay, so people I think have been speculating. I think that Alex says I'll kind of let this out of the bag, so I'm not going to get in trouble. That right, we are working on our own internal system and tools for scholarships. We think it's really important. I don't know 500 Axies. I would love to have scholars. Like I want to go through that experience. It's just like I can't justify making that time commitment right now when it's like very manual. So I think that's also going to be a huge growth catalyst. I think it's really important for the entire ecosystem. And yeah, there's awesome progress being made on that internally.
awesome. All right, I have to ask the question. I know I have a lot of people in chat that want to know it too. I don't know how much you're going to be able to answer it because I don't really think it's an answerable question. But how do you see SLP and other tokens really existing in the future? Is there anything you want to publicly share about that through a voice versus a tweet? I don't again. It's kind of an impossible answer. Like the game has to unfold, in my opinion, and I want to stress that like everything will come to a head, but there's going to be times where there just is an influx of SLP, and
Mm,
the breeding dynamic is a
sure.
key factor in that.
I
So
think I think like so one of the reasons, so like, I think I talked about this earlier, right? Is like, okay, one of the reasons that everyone cares a lot about SLP is that's the main token that is owned by almost everyone in the ecosystem, whether they be right scholarship managers, scholars, PvP. It's like the common denominator. So I think like one of the long term things is also to right like increase right like ownership as a percentage of the community of the Axis token, right? One way to do that could be by right making it like easier to win, or like making more people able to win Axis tokens through the arena or through land, right? And then yeah, potentially right like having other resources right in the ecosystem that can basically right like yeah serve as alternative streams of tokens that also have real value. And then right like people are going to be like, maybe there's a future where everyone is like obsessed about right the price of wood or stuff like that, right? Because that's the main thing that they're earning, or like right like different crafting ingredients, right? So I think like a lot of the questions and a lot of the excitement and a lot of the anxiety around SLP come from that's like the common denominator for all the people that are right playing and earning throughout the ecosystem. But I also think that long term there are going to be alternative routes. I also will say that right like it's very, very, very difficult to manage an in-game economy without something like an Axie sync, right? Without ways for people to be able to spend money to upgrade, right, their Axies or their land and things like that, right? Like right now, like the main way to progress in the game is you get more Axies, right? You get better Axies, you get more Axies, right? But this also creates more SLP, right? So it's been very, I've actually like been astounded that we've been able to get to this point without right like these things. And I think the community also maybe echoes that. They're like, why are you at
yeah,
this point without these things, right?
yeah.
So I have empathy around that, and what I'll say is that we take it really seriously. And we also like a lot of the recent personnel that we've brought on board, I think are going to be super crucial to having nice complete systems around these things.
Awesome. All right. Well, we have about 5 minutes left. I want to kind of end with this, or my biggest question that I wanted to have answered is looking into 2022 further. So, if you can go through what your goals are, or maybe Sky Mavis's goals are for 2022, and without specific deadlines. Again, I know that a bunch of I've been hounding for it too. I don't think you're gonna be able to tell me like, hey, in June 14th we're gonna have V2 or whatever. But if you could try to paint like, if we had another interview in say March, June, and December of next year, what might we be talking about at those thresholds of what's either launched or about to launch or kind of coming in the future? And so maybe run me through this 2022 goals and what you're able to share from a rough 22 thing. I'm not a boomer. I know you said deadlines are for boomers, or
Yeah.
so.
I think like I got a lot of heat for that. Maybe I think like some people understand my sense of humor, or and some don't. Like I probably shouldn't have said that because there are people who just joined the ecosystem, right?
Yeah.
My one of my like communication principles that I've started to think about a lot is like when I say this, how are the 100,000 people who are new to the ecosystem going to think about this if they are only in the ecosystem for 1 week? So I shouldn't have said that, because it can be seen as like, I don't know, like cocky or confident, or like kind of unprofessional. So I'll say that I probably shouldn't say stuff like that in the future. But yeah, like in terms of 2022, uh, yeah, like I think like the theme of this year is like making the game more fun by releasing strategic content. So yeah, like I think V2, like I think is going to be really, really important to our direction this year. And yeah, then I think like getting more yeah, getting land, making massive progress on land that is right visible and hopefully testable and playable by the community. I think that's also going to be really important. And then also taking a step to secure the the Ronin network. It's kind of like the Ronin community now, right? Like we have like 80,000 people farming Ron, I think, or
And what, 5 tattoos, 6 tattoos? I don't even
yeah,
know
yeah,
how many
six
tattoos
tattoos,
we have
right?
now.
So yeah, to make also like start right, like potentially looking at strong partners to onboard into our ecosystem of NFT gaming. games and economies and ecosystems. So I think I think those are really the big things that we need to deliver on. We're working super hard on it. I think we have the personnel to execute on this way in a way better way than I think we were at this time last year.
Awesome.
And I
Well,
think a lot of that is right. Like, yes, now it's like a lot of the best gaming talent in the world that right, like a lot of these people, right? They go to their day job, they work on a traditional game or whatever. They feel like, oh, like I feel kind of bad extracting money from these users, right? Like they feel bad in these extractive systems, but they never knew about an alternative, right? But they have all this awesome applicable experience running a game and building stuff for games. And then right at night, they're getting into NFTs, they're falling down the rabbit hole, right? And they're finding out about Axie Infinity, right? And then right bringing their right like kind of expertise plus their passion and understanding of Axie to the Sky Mavis team, like that's really been the type of person that I think has been super influential to our progress just in the last like quarter or so, and is going to be like I think like really important to the long term success of this ecosystem.
awesome. Well, you have about 400 people in here. If you want to share any maybe last thoughts, rally call into 2022. If you want to leak anything else as far as what the next drop or exciting new release is going to be, I'll take any leak that you want to share. You've already probably shared three that I can think of, or maybe reminders that not everyone in here has already seen. I have other questions about, whether it be marketplace or breeding updates and so many other things. But I really want to give the last minute or two to you to share any other thoughts you want to share with the Lunasians.
Sure. So I want to say that like each and every person within the ecosystem is doing amazing and super important things, right? Like whether you're battling in the arena, whether you're a scholar or a manager, whether you're a breeder or even a Axie trader, whether you're collecting Axies, whether you're helping out in the Discord, whether you're tweeting, right? Whether you're making YouTube tutorials and videos, whether you're a Twitch streamer, whether you're maybe just staking Axis or farming Ron, everyone is doing something that adds value to the ecosystem. Like I think that's the beauty of this movement is that almost everyone, can come in and have something to do, have some way to participate. So we're really creating culture here. That's really what the social capital, the people, is actually what backs the entire ecosystem, the in-game economy. So right, keep being positive, keep trying to help people, education is so important, right? 50% of our users have never used crypto before. Like imagine that, right? Like so they're going through hard times, like right, just getting adjusted to this whole thing, right? So we also have to be aware that right, and not everyone has gone through the same experiences as us. Let's be patient, right? I know it can be right, like stressful when people are like saying the same thing, complaining about the same thing, right? It might sound like whining, but these people are actually like, we need people who are new to crypto and haven't been through these experiences to be coming into the ecosystem, and we need to be embracing them with open arms. And even if they're angry, right, we have to use kindness to educate them. And yeah, so I think like that's really important. Also say that I think like right, like physical and mental health is so important, right? Like make sure that you're doing what you can to exercise, to drink enough water, to get enough sleep. As a whole, right? These are the little things that as a nation, right? If we're all doing these little things, they actually, right, like among multiplied by 3 million, right? They start to create this really positive dynamic that is alluring and interesting to the rest of the world. So yeah, I think like also and I also want to emphasize that we're working super hard, and like we're super excited for 2022 and to share our progress with this amazing community.
Awesome. Well, Jeff, I want to thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for all the people that tuned in. If you missed it, we're late, want to rewatch it, I will post it on YouTube at some point in the next day or two. But thank you so much again for your time, Jeff. Thank you for everyone that tuned in. I appreciate you all being here, and we'll catch you guys next time, hopefully.
Awesome, thanks, man. It was awesome to be here.
Yep. See y'all. Bye.